Year 3 of Formula One sprint races is complete, but it's still failing to pass several tests, and further revisions are expected for 2024. But rather than more of the previous small modifications, Grand Prix bosses need to make even bigger shakeups or drop the format entirely. With many drivers and executives, including Verstappen and Horner, ruthlessly bashing the event every time it came up this season, could we see the end of the sprint races sooner rather than later? Signs of change for the 2024 season are emerging, with discussions underway about rearranging the schedule to ease the restrictive park firm regulations, which currently lock in the car setups once Friday qualifying begins. Essentially, the proposal is to shift sprint qualifying to Friday and the sprint race to Saturday morning, creating a window between it and Saturday afternoon qualifying for any final adjustments. One of the main criticisms of the sprint format among teams has been the inability to make setup changes once locked in. However, the potential for a reshuffled starting order may not be a concern for many fans. Nevertheless, adjusting this rule would provide teams with a second opportunity, ensuring that any mistakes are genuine and not a result of an unfair challenge. After participating in 12 sprint events over the past 3 years, drivers, including Max Verstappen, who's expressed clear dissatisfaction with the sprint experiments, along with possibly other drivers, have begun to pinpoint other areas of concern, and many now believe that the sprint format offers little beyond what is already provided by a standard Grand Prix weekend. Carlos Sainz, for example, argues that the events on Saturday, specifically the sprint race, give away too much about what will transpire on Sunday, and essentially it's like a preview of the first part of the actual race on a Sunday. According to Sainz, the setup doesn't enhance the overall entertainment value, and he believes that the main attraction should be the Grand Prix itself. So if we reached this stage, it's crucial to consider trying something different on Saturday. Sainz and Perez both took aim at qualifying, noting that the common system with qualifying for the Grand Prix, albeit with mandated tyre types and shorter time limits, promotes a race that will closely forecast events in the full Sunday event, and to no surprise, keeping many of the inputs the same reveals a very similar output. It does really appear that sprint races are becoming a permanent fixture in F1, with the intention of boosting viewership and generating competition among venues competing to host them. In light of recent feedback from drivers, Stefano Domenicali's team is now tasked with brainstorming innovative ideas to make these abbreviated races more distinctive. One suggestion that has been put forth by Sergio Perez is implementing reversed grids. However, the most practical way to achieve this would be to reverse the order from the Grand Prix qualifying, as drivers would likely not participate in a separate session for this purpose. This would create a gap in the schedule, potentially allowing for the reintroduction of a practice session to fill the void. Regardless of the approach, sprint races with reversed grids have the potential to deliver more thrilling races compared to the current format, as drivers in slower cars strive to secure victory while faster cars can work their way through the field. If they want to keep this format of sprint races, we got to change it, Perez told the media. I would propose a reverse grid or something like that to make it more interesting for the fans, because I don't think it's working what we want to achieve. Nothing really happens in these sort of races. I think it will mix up things. It would create more opportunities, a lot more overtaking. If we want to keep this format, give it a go on something quite different. For the last 2 years, this sort of event hasn't had a lot of good racing. Many have been advocating for the introduction of reversed grids since the start of sprint races. This format provides smaller teams with an opportunity to achieve results that might have been elusive under the normal system, and even if the points awarded are a small fraction of those available in the Grand Prix, a victory in a sprint race could be crucial for a team seeking to make progress in the Constructors' Championship. However, it is important to acknowledge that this format is fundamentally engineered, because while the appeal of a reversed grid lies in its high entertainment value, as it's arguably the most direct way to ensure a race with numerous overtakes, it may not appease a portion of F1's fanbase that already feels the championship is too focused on the show. If reversed grids don't gain popularity, another option could be a return to one-shot qualifying. For the younger viewers of the channel, this format was used from 2003 to 2005, where each driver had the track to themselves and one opportunity to set a qualifying lap that determined the grid. Given that the final part of sprint qualifying already limits drivers to a single set of soft tyres, it essentially operates as a one-chance format, so formalising this approach would give less prominent teams undivided attention during a season. Despite some entertainment in the Brazil sprint this weekend, especially in battles for midfield spots, there's a growing feeling that the current Standalone Saturday format is not delivering what it should for F1, and having failed to capture the imagination of drivers, with some wanting sprints to be got rid of completely, Horner says the way sprints work at the moment is not favoured by anybody. I think what we have at the moment isn't quite right for the drivers, the fans, or the teams, explained Horner. I think there needs to be more to it. We have just won a sprint race and nobody quite knows what to do because all the focus is already on the Grand Prix. It's like you've won a long run and got a medal for it. If sprint races are still in the experimental phase, then there's certainly room for bold and unconventional approaches to sprint qualifying. Why not explore something entirely different? Formula E has demonstrated that experimenting with qualifying formats can lead to genuinely captivating solutions that break new ground. Its dual format has turned qualifying into as much of an event as the race itself. This isn't a suggestion for F1 to directly adopt the format of its electric-powered counterpart, but rather an encouragement to tap into a similar level of creativity. At the recent United States Grand Prix, which was also a sprint event, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were disqualified from the race after they failed post-race technical checks. With the plank worn below the 1mm allowance, they were thrown out of the results and blamed the lack of practice time given to teams during the weekend to properly set up their cars. Verstappen, who has long been a critic of the sprint format, has asserted that such issues wouldn't occur if F1 stuck to its traditional schedule. We should just get rid of the sprint weekend and then everybody can just set up their cars normally, Verstappen told the media. It wouldn't have happened that we would have had a normal race weekend. These things only happen when you have a sprint weekend where everything is so rushed into your in-between FP1 and qualifying. From our side, I think we went a bit too conservative, but that's still better than the other way. I initially believed that this season's extended sprint format would surpass the previous version because, after all, both racing and qualifying tend to be more exhilarating than free practice, and the whole sprint race dictating the Grand Prix grid and essentially substituting the opening phase of the race was simply not the right thing. However, it ended up being disappointing yet again. The current format effectively separates Saturday from the rest of the weekend, similar to the NBA All-Star weekend, and even when attending live, it feels somewhat inconsequential rather than a must-see spectacle. So while points are distributed, it's insufficient to truly catch one's interest, which is to be expected. If we must maintain this standalone sprint day, one idea would be relocating it to Friday and resuming with FP3 qualifying and the Grand Prix in the customary. In all honesty, and despite sounding somewhat traditional, it would be good to return to the conventional 3 practice session format. This way, the race weekend feels more integrated and logically structured. That's why it's not weird that many F1 fans, including me, currently find normal race weekends more appealing than the sprint ones. This isn't to say that the alternative of 3 practice sessions is inherently better. A 2-day weekend featuring 1 practice session, qualifying, and the race would be an excellent countermeasure to the increasingly packed calendars. However, F1 seems inclined towards more track time, not less, and a sold-out Friday session represents a lucrative revenue stream, and having a session on that day with some level of suspense and significance is certainly valuable. So if the sprint experiment is to continue, F1 must aim to basically go big or go home. So what do you think? Should the sprint races be scrapped entirely from the calendar, or should they be revamped in some way? And if so, Which way would be best? Let us know in the comments below.